Hello dear students, welcome back. Today we are meeting to discuss the last portion of the chapter Deep Water. We are going to end this chapter today in today's video, and this is the fifth part of the chapter. In the last sixth part we shall discuss the question answers of the chapter. So let's discuss today's portion. So dear students, we left the portion here last time. We are discussed till here, and where it is given that William tried to ward off the fear but was unable to get rid of it. And finally, in the month of October, he hired an instructor to teach him swimming. And he would practice for an hour each day, 5 days a week. William describes the learning process also, in which he says the instructor put a belt around William's waist. The belt was attached to a thick rope. The rope went through an overhead pulley and was held by the instructor. And he ensured that in case William drowned, the instructor would pull him out. So William used to swim across the length of the pool for several weeks. And whenever the instructor loosened the rope, he went down into the water and the fear would return to him. I know, as he is writing here, on each trip across the pool, a bit of the panic seized me. Each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and I went under. Some of the old terror returned and my legs froze. So it was 3 months before the tension began to slack. Then he taught me to put my face under water and exhale, and to raise my nose and inhale. I repeated the exercise hundreds of times. Bit by bit, I shed part of the panic that seized me when my head went under water. So whenever the instructor loosened the rope, he went down into the water and the fear would return, and it would immobilize his legs. It was after 3 months of practice that William got comfortable, and then the instructor taught him to breathe in the water. He taught him to put his face under the water and exhale his breath. And then he was taught to raise his nose out of the water and inhale. So William practiced several times. Gradually he got rid of the panic that would grab him when he put his head under the water. So it took months. It took him months to come out of this fear. As he is writing here, at first my legs refused to work, but they gradually relaxed and finally I could command them. Thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer. And when he had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. In April, he said, "Now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool, crawl, stroke." So this paragraph shows us that finally the instructor made a swimmer out of William in phases. When William had perfected each phase, he compiled them, and in the month of April, the instructor told William that now he could swim. And he asked him to dive into the pool and swim the length of the pool in a particular style called the crawl stroke, as it is written here, crawl stroke. Now, stroke is a particular style of moving the arms and legs in swimming. So that movement is called stroke. And further he writes, "I did. The instructor was finished." So this line shows that the William swam and the classes came to an end. Now he has perfectly learned swimming, and he is out of that fear now that he was undergoing from the last many months and year, you may say. But he wanted to test himself. He was not confident enough, he was not convinced enough that, am I out of fear? completely or not. He wanted to test himself. So that is why he is writing here, but I was not finished. I still wondered if I would be terror stricken when I was alone in the pool. And I tried it. I swam the length up and down. No, tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. But now I could frown and say to that terror, trying to scare me, ah, well, here's to you. Look, and off I would go for another length of the pool. So in reality, William had not overcome the fear yet completely, and wondered if the terror would grab him when he would be alone in the water, because now during his training in all these days, he was with his instructor. He was not alone. So he came to fear that now he came to doubt now that I am not alone. What will happen if I'll be alone under the water? Okay. So this is what he wanted to check. So he tried to swim alone in the pool, and yes, as he was expecting, the terror returned in small phases. Vestige is written tiny vestiges. Vestige means a small portion of something. So he tried to swim alone in the pool, and the terror returned in small phases. But now, as he knew how to swim, he faced the terror with confidence, and he swam another length of the pool. And we are seeing in this paragraph that he had started talking to his fear also. He wanted to challenge his fear, that now I know how to swim and I can face this situation when I am under the water. This is what he is undergoing now. He is testing himself. Now further he writes, this went on until July, but I was still not satisfied. I was not sure that all the terror had left. So I went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a dock of Triggs Island, and swam into miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. Only once did the terror return. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. The old sensation returned in miniature. I laughed and said, well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me? It fled and I swam on. So here he is telling you that he was like this till the month of July. He had been practicing this and this again and again till the month of July, but even then he was not satisfied. He wanted to be sure that all of the fear had left him. So he went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived into from Triggs Island, and swam for 2 miles up to Stamp Act Island. And he swam in different styles, all kinds of strokes he had practiced earlier with the instructor. He had practiced all those strokes like crawl stroke, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. So all the strokes were tested by him in the island, and the terror returned only once when he was in the middle of the lake. And when he put his head under water, he saw water all around, and the fear returned to him. But this time William laughed at the terror and said to it that it could not harm him. He saw that the terror vanished and he resumed swimming. So here at this stage, he was certain that he had conquered his fear of water. Now he further says, yet I had residual doubts. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up the Tieton to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Creek Trail to Meady Glacier, and camped in the high meadow by the side of Warm Lake. The next morning I stripped, dived into the lake, and swam across to the other shore and back, just as Dog Corpron used to do. I shouted with joy, and Gilbert Peak returned the echo. I had conquered my fear of water. So he is telling you here that he had still some doubts about the fear. So he hurried into the western direction, and he went up to the Titan, reached Conrad Meadows, walked up to the Conrad Creek Trail to Meady Glaciers, and then he camped at the meadow by the warm lake. And the next morning he wore the swimming costume and dived into the lake. He swam across it to the other end and returned just like the famous American Dog Corcoran used to do. So William shouted with joy when he found that he is out of fear completely now, and he shouted with joy and he had overcome his fear. To know this thing, he was overjoyed and he started shouting. So his voice, when he was shouting, his voice resounded as the mountain peak named Gilbert Peak reverberated. So he had overcome the fear finally. The experience had a deep meaning for me, as only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. In death there is peace. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said, "All we have to fear is the fear itself." Okay, it's a famous saying of President Roosevelt. So basically he is telling you that the experience had a great importance in William's life, and he realized that death was peaceful and only the fear of death was fearful. Death is not fearful. Death is peaceful, but the fear of death was fearful. So he recollects the words of one of the President of America, Roosevelt, and he says that Roosevelt said once that all we have to fear is fear itself. He further says that because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, so the will to live somehow grew in intensity. He is saying that he had experienced death and the fear of death, so his desire to live grew immensely, and he felt released from fear and was free to walk up the trails and climb up the mountains fearlessly. So he wants to make us to understand that when death comes in front of you, the desire to live, the intensity to live grew more stronger. Then in the last he says, at last I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. And now when the intensity to live grows more deeper in his life, he wanted to live each and every moment of his life. Okay, and by quoting Roosevelt words, he wants us to make understand that all we have to fear is fear itself. He tries to draw a larger meaning from his experience. He wants to highlight the fact that life becomes meaningful, and the desire to live grew intense once he had conquered his fear. So you may say that his fear and a struggle to come out of that fear had made him determined to live even stronger. And after conquering the fear that had gripped him, he felt absolutely free and released. So the message that we get from this chapter, and the message that the narrator wants to convey, is that fear of something hampers our progress. Not only as an individual but also as a society. We find numerous true incidents in our books which tells us how fear cripples the mind and the society. So by telling all these incidents and accidents and experience of his own life, true experiences that he is sharing in this chapter with us, he wants to make us free from all kinds of fears. because he believed that these fears makes us unprogressive and it hampers our progress. So therefore, dear children, this chapter shows us that courage is the key to fight any kind of fear. In death there is peace and there is terror only in the fear of death. So this is what he had experienced in his life and he has shared here in this chapter, so that we can learn this key of courage to find any kind of fear, so that we can develop ourselves and progress in the future. So this is all about the chapter, dear children. Now this is the end of the chapter and a very good lesson we have learned here. And in the last portion of this video, that means the 6th part of this chapter, we shall discuss the question answers. So till then, goodbye.